Today, a Democratic lawmaker threatens the Catholic Church's tax-exempt status over abortion. The White House will not meet its vaccination goal, and a Seattle Pride event will make white attendees pay a reparations fee. Yes, the world is going crazy, but we have got a lot to get into. We will break it down for you, and it starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I am Sarah Gonzalez. I am very excited about this show. We have got two new people on their maiden voyage on the show. We've got Lila Rose here in studio, who is the author of Fighting for Life and also, of course, the founder and president of Live Action, who I have to admit, I am a huge fangirl of you. So I'm very excited to have you on. Yes. And then we also have on his maiden voyage on the show, Matthew Peterson, who is the founder of The American Mind and president of New Founding. Can I call you Matt?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
All right. We like to be very casual here, and we're just going to act like we've known each other for years.
Of course.
So let's get into the headlines of the day. So a Democratic lawmaker from California is this is California Representative Jared Huffman, who tweeted. This was, I believe, Friday in response to, we talked about this yesterday on the program, who was the statement issued by Democratic lawmakers that it might just be time to rebuke the Catholic Church's tax-exempt status. Now, this is, the Catholic Church has been, let's see, here we go. They've been talking about the abortion subject when it comes to Democratic lawmakers, trying to figure out how they are going to, get lawmakers who call themselves Catholic to stop saying, yes, you can get a baby aborted up until the point of birth. So church officials revealed last week that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops voted 165 to 88 to reconsider the rules about who can receive communion and whether or not politicians that support and promote abortion should be permitted to take the Eucharist. So now this lawmaker has come out and said, well, you know what? Maybe we should just reconsider their tax-exempt status, all right? Now, I want to get your thoughts on that particular subject, guys, but I also want to, let me just replay for you the conversation that is being had in the mainstream media with these top Democratic lawmakers that has taken place, I think, since Friday. It was Friday and then yesterday. So here first is Joe Biden being asked about this particular topic in a press conference. Here is what he had to say.
Comment about what the Catholic bishops have done. Are you concerned about this rift within the Catholic Church, and are you concerned about this action?
Say again?
The Catholic bishops are moving on this resolution that would prevent you and others who've supported abortion from receiving communion. Are you concerned about the rift in the Catholic Church, and how do you feel personally about that?
That's a private matter, and I don't think that's going to happen. Thank you.
Mr. President, so on Ukraine.
You always have to be really confident in your president when it takes 3 times of repeating a question just for him to understand what they're asking. But it didn't stop there. Shockingly, mainstream media reporters did not stop there. Of course, we have this upcoming Supreme Court case. So they were actually asking, I will give them just a tiny bit of credit, all right? Somewhat tough questions. That doesn't mean that they were answered appropriately, but they were asking the questions on whether or not an unborn baby is a human being. Let's listen first to Nancy Pelosi answering that question. Watch.
The Supreme Court this fall will review a Mississippi law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Is an unborn baby at 15 weeks a human being?
Let me just say that I am a big supporter of Roe v. Wade. I am a mother of 5 children in 6 years. I think I have some standing on this issue as to respecting a woman's right to choose.
Is it a human being?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
So, of course, not answering the question that was, very simple. Is an unborn baby a human being? So I figure they just thought, let's try again. Okay, let's ask White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who should be speaking for the President of the United States, right? Is a 15-week-old fetus a human being, or I don't know, is it a cantaloupe or a pickle or a kangaroo? Is it a human being? And here is the White House press secretary. Watch.
Go ahead.
One last question.
Oh, go.
One last question.
Sure.
Does the president believe that a 15-week-old unborn baby is a human being?
Are you asking me if the president supports a woman's right to choose? He does.
No.
Go ahead.
No, actually, she wasn't asking that question. If she was going to ask that question, she would have asked whether or not the president supports the right to choose. Interesting, Lila, how they do not actually answer the question, is an unborn baby a human being?
There's only one answer, and that's crystal clear. You open any biology textbook, and this is human beings create human beings. They're human in the womb, they're human after birth, and it's really sad to see the most powerful politicians, and it's maddening to see the most powerful politicians in the world today just be science deniers, complete science deniers, totally objectifying human beings, not even like acknowledging their existence, and then touting the talking point about the woman's right to choose. I mean, the right to choose what?
Right.
That's the question. And I'm a woman, I'm a mom, I do not have the right to choose to kill my children. They're not my property. They're entrusted to me. And I'm so done with the talking point that women are pro-abortion and that we need to be for women's rights means killing children. No, I'm for children's rights just as much as for women's rights. So
it is interesting too, because they tout this follow the science line a lot, right? I mean, we're really, if you listen to them now, which I mean we can get into later, but we're told you have to vaccinate yourself with this particular vaccination that, by the way, has not been FDA approved, but you have to vaccinate yourself because you have to follow the science. You have to wear a mask because you have to follow the science. You have to always follow the science. It seems as though they don't actually know what science is, Matt.
Yeah, if there's a silver lining in all this, it's that this ruse has broken down. I mean, these answers that we're getting are the same thing that we have heard, as Lila has dealt with for years. They've been around for decades, refusing to answer the question. The difference is, the context now is that the American people don't believe in science because they see politicized science is what is meant by the left. And so these answers are even weaker now. I think that's exactly right. Even weaker now than they ever have been, because everyone knows that science is an op. Science is a psyop. Science is politicized. And if that's what they want to, they want to poll and they want to keep pushing that point, then this is the reaction they'll get. And so, look at what we see here. These people are old and gaunt, and their voices are cracking, and they're very quiet, and they're just repeating the same mantra over and over again. And I think what's so exciting about what's going on, in a way, if there's a silver lining in the clown world that we live in, right, it's that when the Catholic Church does put its foot down, when anyone makes any kind of stir to say something true, it starts to crack the apparatus because it's all broken. It's like a broken machine, right? And they're just chunking the same old words into it, and they're not working.
The story about the Catholic Church is so wild to me, the way it's being presented in media right now, because it's 2,000 years of pro-life position for the Catholic Church. I mean, this is not news.
It should not be shocking.
And it's also 2,000 years of post-Christ, you don't present yourself for Holy Communion if you're an unrepented, grave sin, and that includes promoting the killing, the murder of children. So, President Biden is endangering his own soul when he presents himself for communion, and for the bishops to state that clearly is not some revelation. And the church has been saying this for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's crazy how a media headline can create this new narrative that is actually just creating, it's like a tempest in a teapot. And what Biden is doing is wrong. It needs to be called out because it's a specific crime for the president of the United States. It's scandalous for him to be using his faith as a public relations tool. That's what he's done, even during the campaign. Remember, it's the Catholic grandpa Biden. I'm going to mass, I have my rosary, and here he is literally advocating for abortion until birth. I mean, that's the public policy he supports. Most people don't realize that. So good for the bishops for speaking out, and it's a reminder. What they're doing is they're reminding the faithful to say, listen, if you're going to be a practicing Catholic, you can't promote killing God's children. I mean, this is not even a debate in the church.
I do find it too particularly heinous when you have people like Nancy Pelosi who tout the fact that she is a mother, right? In order to say somehow she has more standing to tell you that you have the right to choose to kill your own child. Because I find that it's like, but you're a mom. You've experienced this. You've gone through it. You've had the baby in your stomach. You felt the baby kick. You gave birth to this child. How can you then stand behind a podium and tell people, well, I'm a mother, therefore it gives me, great authority to tell you that you too have the ability to choose whether or not you kill your baby or let it be born. It's just so heinous.
It's dehumanization. I mean, once you desensitize yourself to literal dismemberment, poisoning, decapitation of a preborn child, everyone with a beating heart killed by abortion, you desensitize the reality of that death, and then you dehumanize them. They're not a human the way a born child is. Then you can get up there with a straight face like Speaker Pelosi did, and say, I have 4 kids, but I'm still for this death. I mean, look at human history, like genocides in the past and human rights abuses in the past, they always hinged on dehumanization. Blacks are less than, or Jews are less than, or women are less than. And that's what we're doing to babies today. And it's just ironic that the party that claims to be for the little guy, the vulnerable, like that's what the Democrats are supposed to be about, are just trampling again and again on the most vulnerable. And, I know most folks listening are probably strongly on the right, but I think some people on the left are getting more concerned about the radicalism because it's so pro-abortion on the left, extraordinarily pro-abortion.
It's also, it's a private matter. We're talking about politics. We're talking about political policy and the law. Plus, we're talking about public figures who are prominent, who people watch. And as Lila points out, you're so right. He ran on being a moderate. He ran on being that Catholic grandpa. And if you want to play that game, as Nancy sure does, she's done it her whole life, and then turn around and say, well, this is a private matter. It's never been a private matter.
Don't be surprised when a bishop says, stop, what are you doing, dude? That's a good bishop right there.
What I can't get over is, why? So Congressman Ted Lieu, I'm sure maybe you've already talked about this.
God bless him, but God help him.
He's mostly helping.
He's just yelling right on Twitter, please, I dare you to refuse me communion. And it's one of these things like, I'd never join a club that would have me as a member. Start a church. It's a very strange demand that now you need to use the power of government for this private matter to force the church to do what you want. And all I can think is, at the end of the day, there is this kind of Borg-like desire to create a church of the rainbow flag where anything goes.
That's the thing. He can do that, but the whole world of Catholicism. I became Catholic in college, and when I became Catholic, I wasn't saying I'm going to become Catholic and I get to pick and choose. This is what I believe and this is what I don't believe. So I'm like a half Catholic. I'm a third Catholic. You're Catholic or you're not practicing your Catholic faith. You're lapsed Catholic. So for Ted Lieu to go on Twitter and say, I'm for same-sex marriage. I'm for abortion, I'm for all of these things that the church is strongly against for, again, hundreds of years because of natural law, and we can talk about the philosophy if we want to, it's nonsensical. He's like you're saying, he's building his own religion. And it's not Catholicism.
Well, it is interesting too, because for all of the I would say talk, but I really want to say screaming, for all of the screaming that we heard about Donald Trump being a fascist, right? Donald Trump is a fascist because he does X, Y, Z. And then you hear people calling to remove the tax-exempt status of a church because of their, philosophy. Right, because of their philosophy or because of their faith. It's like, I thought you guys were the ones who were concerned about fascism, about authoritarianism, and about, keeping the separation of church and state. It's this very peculiar.
Oh, yeah.
Matt.
So, I look, you don't get your calling card these days until someone calls you a fascist in print, right? I presume that we've all experienced this. Yes. And I think what's so damning about this is they've devalued the word, so everyone's a fascist.
Right.
But time and time again, I think more people in America, and on the left as well, as Lila points out, not just the right, are at least quietly very concerned about what's going on, because when you have large corporations and the government working together to enforce their official views on events, right? They put out press releases, big corporations, woke corporations on events. They tell you what you're supposed to think in conjunction and collusion with the government. That reminds me of a regime form, and I'd like someone to name what that is. And I don't know, I don't think that word means much anymore at the hands of the left. And this is even more than that, though. This is demanding that a 2,000-year-old institution changes its views for the sake of the likes of Ted Lieu. I would love to read his deep philosophical work about his, the theology he studied.
It's
to
just
understand.
it's just not going to happen, Ted. I don't know if you've read any of church history, but there's something called a heretic. Yeah. And throughout history, they've popped up and they've said, I don't like this, I don't like that. And they just, that you're called a heretic because the church doesn't change its teachings. Once it's the moral law, you can't change the moral law because of your new ideas of progressivism or whatever it might be. That's actually not progress. Yeah. It's a wrong view of the human person, and your new moral code is actually going to be subjugating, hurting other people, which is what the left has done today, unfortunately. And just both sides, I think, ideologically can get so caught up in politics that we forget basic fundamentals. And that's what we need to return to.
Well, I think, spoiler alert, I don't think he actually has read about the Catholic faith. I think that's where he
I hope
is
he does.
mistaken.
It's beautiful.
I hope he does too, yeah.
I mean, you actually read it. It's beautiful.
He needs some religion in his life. I'll just say that. We've got more to come. We
all do.
We've got more to come. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Home Title Lock. So if you do not know about the crime of home title theft, consider yourself lucky, because that means you have not experienced a cyber thief removing you from your home's title and forging your signature on a quitclaim deed, and then they become the owner of your house, and then all of the equity that you have in your home, all of your retirement nest egg, is gone. All right, so you don't want to experience this. And you probably may be thinking, well, I have an identity theft program that I'm a part of, or I'm sure my bank protects me against that. Actually, no. Common identity theft programs, banking programs, they do not protect you from this particular crime, but Home Title Lock does. Home Title Lock will put a virtual barrier around your home's title and mortgage, and the instant that they detect tampering, they will shut it down. Here's the catch. You gotta go to HometitleLock.com, register your address to see if you're already a victim. Because if you don't, you're going to wait until it's too late. And then once it's too late, they've already done the damage. Don't do that. Go to HometitleLock.com. Sign up for 30 free days of protection using promo code RADIO. Again, I understand this is not a radio show. Don't know why the promo code is radio, but just use it. All right, go to HometitleLock.com. That is HometitleLock.com, promo code RADIO. Back in a minute. All right, before we get to the vaccination goal that the White House has announced they will not meet, I do want to, I want to talk on one more issue with this whole abortion thing, with the top Democratic lawmakers not acknowledging that a baby inside the womb is in fact a human being and does not go through some weird transformative process when they enter the magical birth canal that creates them into a human being. They were in fact still a human being, but I'm hopeful, maybe in a sense, that I see the pendulum has swung so far the radical way that, as you said, Lila, you pointed out, that these top Democratic lawmakers support abortion up until the point of birth. They will not denounce it at all up until the point of birth. And even then you have Ralph Northam, who comes out and says, what he said. So I'm hopeful, I guess, that, I see some of these, Generation Z? I'm so old, I don't know what the latest generation is called, but I see these young females who are in high school, who are entering college, who I think have seen how far the pendulum has swung the other way. And I think that they're going, hold on a second, you guys, but that's a baby, and you're telling me that I have the right to kill it until I give birth to it? That doesn't make sense. Am I being too hopeful here? I'm not accused often of being optimistic on this show.
Well, there's some indicators that are really promising. So abortion rate has declined for the last 10 years, the last decade, and it's at, in some ways, historic lows since Roe v. Wade. So there's that. There's the fact that there's been unprecedented pro-life legislation at the state level in the last 2 years, almost 600 bills. And then I've seen in the last 10 years, Live Action, we have over 5 million people following us. Most of them are young women, and they are actively saying, I was pro-choice, now I'm pro-life, or they're persuading their friends. And then the polling on it, remarkably, despite polling on other issues like sexuality issues seeming to go left with younger generations, they're staying strongly. There's a strong pro-life contingency that's not moving in Gen Z and millennials. And we have to keep growing that. And that's education. I mean, because keep in mind the institutions, if you spend 12 years in public school today, you go to virtually almost any university, not every, but most, you're going to be brainwashed when it comes to abortion, period. I mean, it's just, and I was just talking to a young woman today at a conference. She said, I was pro-choice. I just thought that's what you're supposed to be as a woman. You're pro-choice, that's for women. But then I talked to my friend and she showed me this video of what abortion was, and I was like, oh my goodness, how can I be for this? This is a baby. It's like the light bulb turns on. that's the power of propaganda to turn off the light bulb, right? So I'm very hopeful because of that. The more education we do, the more we're going to see pro-life public opinion.
Yeah, Matt.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think Lila's in touch with this as much as anyone in the country. And I think the important thing that I would add is that within whatever the ultimate numbers are, who's pro-life and who's not among the young, given that all the institutions are against us, that number holds strong because it's very hard to get away from this kind of fundamental truth. But the one thing I've noticed that is hopeful is that among younger people, and the youngest generation especially, there are increasing amounts of increasing numbers of groups that haven't quite coalesced that are rejecting the ideology that's being forced on them. And what's interesting is a lot of them aren't necessarily religious at all. They don't have any kind of religious background, but they kind of wake up one day and become woke in an opposite sense and say, this is all a kind of psyop against us. So I guess the word I used earlier. I mean, so they look around and say, I reject this kind of degeneracy. So what's happening, which I think no one's talking about, and people should be talking about, the church should be very interested in this, is that you have groups of young people without any kind of religious foundation who are just waking up to the fact that when it comes to sexual issues and the so-called social issues, they've been lied to. And so they don't necessarily know where to go with that, but there's a real interest in some kind of more traditional way of life, and it's organic, and it's real. And I think that the right has done a terrible job of kind of reaching those people of this movement. Some people in the churches don't even seem to be aware of it. But, you know, you can't tell me that everyone who wants to lift weights, stop looking at porn, and thinks abortion is bad and wants to live a traditional life is a white supremacist. I think, you know, there's probably something else going on there.
And I think it's more, I think it's also reframing it. It's not just a traditional life, because traditions can be broken, but it's a good life. I mean, I think people want to be happy. And I remember just laughing. I read a Harvard study, their 80-year-old happiness study. So they studied people over 80 years, what makes human beings happy. And it wasn't poverty or wealth that makes you happy or unhappy. It wasn't sickness or health makes you happy or unhappy. It was being married and having a family and being faithful to your family and your spouse. And that's, you know, earth to human beings.
Needed a study?
I know, but I
think
love
my
it.
grandma told me that.
I know, I think my great-grandma told me that. But I love that, because when people, I think, have the opportunity to see that in a positive way, like marriage in a positive way, family in a positive way, and we need more examples of that, it's captivating. And that's where I have, like you're saying, I have so much hope too, Matt, because people aren't happy with the way things are going, and the ideologies are becoming so toxic. So it's like a return to their own humanity. I think that's what people are looking for.
And that's in a nutshell, that's the phrase that we like to use, actually, is a more human way of life.
And I do,
really good phrase.
No, I do like that, because I think that there is something to be said about the messaging and how you portray it, because the left has done such a great job of controlling language, controlling the messaging that they use. They make, you know, like you said, like traditional. That makes it sound bad, right? You can't use that word anymore. And so they've just done such a great job. I think it's good to be able to take some of that control of the language back and say, okay, well, if you're going to say traditional is crap, then I'll just come up with a new way of framing it that still people will gravitate to, because it's what people are supposed to gravitate to. All right, let's get to the White House, which is expected to announce that it will not reach President Biden's previously set vaccination goal by July 4th. Now, they were saying that they wanted to partially vaccinate 70% of American adults by Independence Day. Now, this was, I believe, Joe Biden's, he said, well, we want you to be able to celebrate on Independence Day, but we need to be able to do that. And your key to being allowed to celebrate Independence Day, which is just so ironic to me, is that you guys get vaccinated. So, you know, forget the fact that, we celebrated Independence Day, like, getting away from a tyrannical government who told us what to do and all of that. That's all well and good. But Joe Biden wants to give you permission to celebrate Independence Day contingent upon you vaccinating yourself. Now, by the way, this comes at a time where they're discussing variants, but also the World Health Organization just came out and said we are not recommending that children get vaccinated anymore. Now they're, attributing it to, well, there's vaccine shortages and we don't know enough. Oh, by the way, children are not expected to do poorly with this virus virus. They should have fine health outcomes, so don't vaccinate them. It's like, well, where were you guys months ago when there was this push to get an experimental vaccine into, 12 and up? Children.
I think the whole key with this, and again, it's nuance. It's a complex issue, and I think the nuance is important. But I think that's where people's individual choices here about vaccination is so important, especially with a new vaccine on the market, and everybody has different risks, and different family members who have different risks themselves.
Right.
So I think it's there's a positive thing to having vaccination available and some being vaccinated. Pressure tactics I think are concerning, and especially when they're pressure tactics on kids and younger, healthier people who have to make their own decisions about the risk of an untried vaccine versus the risk of COVID. So I think this is really where public health needs to recognize the advantages, but also be honest about the disadvantages. And that's been, I think, the complaint on both sides. I've seen left and right say, we don't like how this has been handled.
Yeah.
But I don't see much acknowledgement of that mishandling from government authorities, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is interesting, Matt, because I think nothing makes me more skeptical than when someone says something that seems to be a very benign observation about what's going on with the vaccine, and big tech is like, nope, you're not allowed to say that. Nope, we're going to put a missing context, thing on this. Yeah. It's like that. Okay, now I'm skeptical of what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah, we need a new technology movement, which is what myself and many others are trying to foster.
Yes.
And because there's acknowledgement from people in tech who quietly disagree with the Borg. But what I would say to this vaccination issue, look, it's like we said earlier, no one trusts the science anymore. We know the game. If the same people couldn't admit to you that it was plausible, what a 5-minute Google search would have told you in late January of last year about the origins of the virus. We couldn't admit that. That had to be banned right away. It took Zero Hedge off Twitter. That was my red flag.
Yeah.
Right? As soon as that happened, I knew, I don't care what you think about Zero Hedge, the website or whatever, but as soon as they went down for merely suggesting with evidence that it came from a lab, that's when I knew China's actually involved. And that's when I started to get worried about the virus at that point, because I knew it was real, right? Because China wouldn't have done that unless they were the ones pressuring Twitter. So, but this is old news.
Yeah.
We know the games that they've played over the last year. So asking Americans to blindly trust what these authorities say about vaccination is just beyond the pale. Like you can't do that to people. And the fact of the matter is, no matter what they do, no one trusts them. And so I think this is a wake-up call. I mean, people are not going to go take a vaccine from authorities that have lied to them repeatedly over the last year in egregious ways that have led to the loss of human life. And so this is a very serious issue, and it's not going to go away. And I applaud people like I just saw this Buffalo Bills football player Cole Beasley saying, I don't need to take the vaccine, and I'm not going to. So you can do what you want.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for vaccines. There's a place for this vaccine. But I applaud him for what he said there. That was great. And in fact, more people are going to say it, and more people should, because they're not going to change their approach with enforcing big science, politicized science on the rest of us until people start taking that stand.
It's tricky because this is in many ways an unprecedented pandemic, at least for our last decades, right? And so if you're a public official, you're trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I do what I'm supposed to do to contain this, so they're dealing with those complexities, and they're getting their incomplete information that they're getting. And then the public is very skeptical of what they're being told to do, or they feel pressured to do. So that's where the complexity, I just think, really being honest. If you're a public official, if you don't know something, maybe admitting you don't know it, and giving as many options as possible, I think is important. And protecting freedoms as much as possible with something like a vaccine, but at the same time, working for the public good. That's their job, and I think that's something we should appreciate. But the checks and balances of calling out dishonesty or cover-ups, I think that's where people get really concerned, and you can totally understand why.
Yeah, and I also think that this is really the moment where you can actually say, and it's true, my body, my choice. Right, because it actually just is your body, not another one. So
but even there, if you were, even there, it doesn't work, because you can't. We don't let people do, like, if you're going to jump off a bridge and say, my body, my choice, I'm jumping off this bridge, I still want to try to rescue you.
Yeah, fair.
You know what I'm saying? So I push back a little on that.
Well, on vaccines. if you're going to inject something into you,
yeah, I don't think the
technically
government
your body.
should force you to have a vaccine. I agree with that.
Yes,
your
yeah,
workplace
that's all I
might
meant.
say to come to your job, I want you to have a vaccine, and that's your boss might have that opinion, and that's their what they might choose to do. But yes, I just my body, my choice. Period. I'm like, it doesn't work. Any situation, not going
Lila
there.
has PTSD from being used against her for so long.
Not against me, against children. I'm fine, but the children aren't.
All right, we've got more to come. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Built Bar. So if you guys have not gotten on the Built Bar bandwagon, you're missing out, especially if you are a chocolate lover like I am. All of their Built Bars, they're, by the way, protein bars, so they're going to be high in protein, high in fiber, low in calories and carbs. They're all covered in 100% chocolate. So you feel like you're eating a candy bar, but it's not going to expand your waistline, and it is actually healthy for you. Although I will say, I think if you eat like 5 a day, you probably don't want to do that. Okay, you don't want to eat 5 Built Bars a day. But you could have one for breakfast. You could have another one for lunch. You might be like me and you're driving home at the end of the day and you're like, how many Built Bars have I had today? Can I have another one? I don't know. I don't like to talk about that. But you got to try it if you have not yet tried it. We've gotten so many reviews from so many viewers out there. You guys are loving Built Bar. By the way, if you don't know what flavor you want to buy, you can get a mixed box and you can try 2 of each of the 9 flavors that you choose. All you have to do is go to built.com. They've got a new URL. It is built.com. Easier to remember. Use promo code news15. You'll save 10% off of your order with promo code news15 only at built.com. Former President Barack Obama's one of the task force members on the 21st century policing raised eyebrows, let me just put it to you that way, whenever she insisted that defunding the police, this is a movement that has kind of been sweeping the nation, that defunding the police, we need to do it because police are all white supremacists. Forget that there are actually, black police officers, Hispanic police officers. They're not all white people, but that is all well and good. But they're all white supremacists. They're all horrible people. They want to kill black people. We are being told all of this. So there was this push to defund the police. Well, unsurprisingly, violent crime rose. And then you saw all of these cities go, okay, well, maybe we need to refund the police again. We're going to actually allocate more money to go to these police departments because it turns out that taking money away from them does not do the trick. Well, this particular activist who formerly worked for President Barack Obama is now an MSNBC contributor. This is Brittany Packnett Cunningham. She has a very interesting philosophy for why police officers are actually the ones who are responsible for that spike in the violent crime, not the defund the police movement. Watch.
I think that there are a lot of police unions and GOP operatives that would like for us to believe that this recent crime wave has everything to do with this idea of defunding the police. But guess what, Stephanie? The police haven't been defunded. You actually look at the 50 largest cities' law enforcement spending as a share of the general expenditure in each of those cities actually rose slightly from 13.6% to 13.7%. And many of the cities that have talked about removing that money, like Minneapolis and Seattle, they've actually paused or slowed how they were thinking about moving that money. So this rising crime is not the fault of the movement. It's actually the fault of the police. And this has been our point all along. Why should we keep funding systems and institutions that keep rendering themselves ineffective? We should be talking about gun control, livable wages, fair housing, education. That's where we should be moving the money to ensure truly safe streets.
Matt, this is what I talked about when I said they control the language so efficiently, I might add. They do a very good job of controlling the language. Well, they're not actually defunding the police because they're just slowing the way that they're allocating the money. Actually, it's the police officer's fault.
Yeah, well, I forget. I mean, I thought they weren't defunding the police. Remember, defund the police didn't mean defund the police, and then it did mean defund the police again.
That's right.
And now that's the problem. I mean, look, I'm actually an accelerationist on this. I mean, I'm all for it. You go nuts. Go ahead. I already moved from California to Texas. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Please defund
Do your little science experiment.
Keep going
and see
because
what
the experiment is working beautifully. That's why everyone's moving. Mm-hmm. So just keep going with it, and maybe we'll learn a lesson. I have no problem with this if If we just push this until there's no police, that'll be great. And we'll see, we already know what's going to happen. You already see this in California. You will have wealthy people hiring private security as they are in their neighborhoods. Well, law and order falls apart around them. And, you know, the great lie of the last year, the great untruth, or really just the hidden truth, is why is everyone moving, right? I mean, they're moving because of the virus and the pandemic. They're moving because of everything other than being really scared about crime in their city, right? So I don't think this works overall. I mean, I think this has an equal and opposite reaction. We see that playing out, and I don't see them stopping with this either. They're very much entrenched in some of these cities, the people who believe this. And you know, even a responsible lefty, right, a responsible Democratic mayor will actually, we published one in the American Mind, will actually say, no, defunding the police is a bad idea. Any responsible leader will actually lay that out. But if we don't want to be responsible and we want to play these games, by all means, go nuts. Take away the police.
Well, and I think the solution is complex, and I'm not an expert, but from those that are responsible, mayors or people who it's their job to solve these problems, it can involve better training for police, empowering social workers who are equipped to deal with mental health issues. And I do agree, it does involve improving education and working conditions for those that are lower socioeconomic groups in communities, because there are connections. If you grow up in a crime-ridden neighborhood and that's your, you know, there is a school to prison, you know, shoot for you. That does happen. So I think the solution, and I think for conservatives who are listening, we have to be comprehensive in our solution. Like, yes, do we need police? Yes, we need police, but we need more than police. And I think that should be the conversation, not so much defund or don't defund, but the bigger picture of how do we actually solve the problems of improving our cities. You know, I was living in Los Angeles, in downtown Los Angeles, and we left, and it was just heartbreaking to see a city try to come back to life, to only be smashed to bits again. And you know, the suffering of the homeless on the street corners when there are these high-rise fancy buildings on the same corners. How do we improve conditions for everyone here? And that's hard. It's messy. It requires compromise. It requires nuance. But I think that should be the conversation instead of these battles over overly simplistic positions being pitted against each other, instead of diving into the nuance of how do we improve our communities.
Yeah, I mean, we should say though, I mean, it's, I like what you said about the homeless. I mean, I don't know how people think it's humane to have all these people living this way in public in the middle of a city. How do people think that's humane for them, right? I mean, this is a crazy idea. But similarly, when it comes to the police, we should note most people who live in those crime-ridden neighborhoods do not want to defund the police.
Of course,
and so there really is, even in their simplistic mantra, right? I mean, this is not, they do not represent the black community, the Hispanic community,
and
or any other community. And I think
it's a fringe. I think they get a lot of noise. I think there's, you know, noise on both sides. And I think on the side of defund the police, that kind of language is highly charged and it's, you know, it's loud. But you talk to, like you said, the Democratic mayor, you talk to everyday people trying to make their cities better, and they're looking at a more comprehensive solution. And it's not just a talking point.
All right, we've got more to come, but we got to take a break. We'll be back.
Sorry, guys, I'm your moderate today.
A Seattle LGBT Pride event, this is called Taking Black Pride, is seeking to charge white attendees a $10 to $50 reparations fee. This is, they say, in order to, quote, keep the event free of cost for black and brown, trans, and queer communities. Now, there were some organizers who complained. The Seattle Human Rights Commission, which I think is just crazy, the Seattle Human Rights Commission, that's actually a thing that exists. They blasted these people on social media in a tweet that included their unredacted phone number, and the pair were forced to apologize. So we are now at a place where white people are actually being charged a reparations fee for attending. By the way, they're like, I mean, by these people's own definition, these are allies, right? These are allies. These are people who are coming out in support of them. It's not enough, though. They said that they have to pay a reparations fee. And if you call this reverse racism, which, by the way, I don't think exists, there's no such thing as reverse racism. There's only racism, and you can be racist or you can not be racist. But reverse racism doesn't make much sense to me. If you call this reverse racism or racism itself, you will be blasted by the Human Rights Commission of Seattle. It's hard for me to believe in 2021 that we are actually discussing this story. This is how far we've come. Martin Luther King Jr. would be rolling around in his grave. Lila?
I mean, I don't know if this is going to be a popular opinion right here, but I think by virtually any standard, the Black community in this country is suffering. And to say that it has nothing to do with our history, I think is wild. And untrue. So I do think there needs to be, I think the conversations about reparations that some people try to have, it's based on the fact that the Black community is suffering. If you're a Black kid, your opportunities compared to a white kid are just not the same, you know, and your health outcomes, your educational outcomes, your poverty, you know, your wealth outcomes, they're all not as good. Even a Black woman is 3 to 5 times more likely than a white woman to have an abortion.
But would you blame that on racism?
I think institutionalized racism in our history is absolutely a part of that legacy, yes. And I think for us to pretend that it has nothing to do with it, I understand the spirit of that idea, which is to say we don't want to perpetuate racism into the future. So I understand your points about reverse racism. We don't want to flip the other way or to say let's just stay obsessed with race our entire history. Right. But I do think we have to reckon with the hurt that exists in the Black community and the fact that there have been policies, Jim Crow policies before that, slavery, that really damaged the Black family and damaged Black futures. Yeah. So, and to have that conversation isn't racist. That's the other thing. Like, to have that conversation isn't racist, and I think it's a way forward.
Yeah. I don't think that, you know, you can't discredit that. Obviously, there were some hurts that occurred during Jim Crow.
Big time. I mean, devastating. Redlining and I mean segregation, everything. I
just wonder, Matt, how far can you take that? How many generations can you take that before you say, okay, hold on, is this really a hindrance to you actually moving forward by focusing on what happened in the past?
Well, look, these are big questions, but so I just want to go back to this original incident. The fact of the matter is, it already is whatever you want to call it. Reverse racism, I mean, it's anti-white. I mean, that's just what the books say. I mean, they're talking about whiteness as if it's evil. That is what's being perpetrated in many cases in the schools. You can read those documents, and that is the solution on the table. The solution on the table to racial tension is saying, okay, let's go with this. White people are bad, and by the way, other people are bad too, and let's create weird racialized hierarchies, and let's start to enforce them with the power of law or in kind of acts of, you know, struggle sessions and acts of obeisance to various powers and identities. And so what you get in this example is precisely that. Reparations will mean you give me money. You know, and the problem is that is something that can easily rip a society apart. And you're going to see it happen. You're going to see some kind of reparations in California, I'm sure. And I think the spirit of it will be very much the spirit of a kind of weird revenge, right, rather than something that heals us. And so this is very disturbing because this kind of thing is happening all over. And you know, because the allies are white, right, the way to be an ally is to give money and be singled out because of your race or ethnicity. And if we think that that's a solution to racial tensions in this country, right, we got another thing coming, because this is fomenting division in a very deep and dark way. And I think, you know, most Americans do not want this, but it is being pushed upon them by many radicals, and it's a very disturbing trend.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. I hate to cut you off. We got to take a break, though. All right. We'll be back. Sorry.
All right,
Lila, I want to give you last word on this, and then I want to make sure everyone knows where to find your book. Go.
Thank you. So last word on it is, there's going to be a lot of maybe crazy solutions to the plight of Blacks in America that we might, you know, people will criticize, but this and that. I think the solution is to get a better solution. How do we uplift our neighbors and those who are struggling? And that should be the focus, I think, of conservatives. That should be the conversation. And my book, Fighting for Life, is about solutions, how to become a force for change in a wounded world. 27 steps I've learned, I'm still learning, for how to make a difference in the world, make it better. Hope it's encouraging to you and it inspires you.
Yes, Fighting for Life. Make sure you can get it anywhere you can find
your book.
Books, right? Amazon, wherever you need to go. And don't forget to join BlazeTV. Go to blazetv.com, use promo code NEWS. Matt, thank you as well for joining us.
Thank
it was
you
a
so
pleasure.
Much.